a cold winter's haunt. The holiday escape. The Landers family had long dreamed of a quiet Christmas away from the chaos of the city. This year, they made it happen. The rented cabin in the snowy woods of Aspen seemed like the perfect place to reconnect as a family. John Landers, a workaholic father, had promised his wife, Clara, and their two children, Emma, 16, and Max, 10, that this year would be special. No work, no distractions, just the family and the peaceful quiet of winter. As they arrived at the cabin on Christmas Eve, the snow fell in gentle drifts, blanketing the woods in a serene white glow. The cabin itself was quaint, with dark wooden beams, a stone fireplace, and windows that overlooked the sprawling forest. "This is perfect," Clara said, hugging herself against the cold. "It's going to be a Christmas to remember," John said with a grin. But none of them knew just how true that would be. The first night. The cabin was cozy and warm, with a fire crackling in the hearth as the family settled in. Max busied himself exploring the cabin, finding board games, a stack of old books, and a collection of Christmas decorations left behind by the previous tenants. In the corner of the living room stood a Christmas tree, its branches bare but for a few tattered ornaments. Max found a box of decorations in the closet and began hanging them up. As he rummaged through the box, he found something odd, an old glass ornament shaped like a bell. It was tarnished and scratched, and when he held it, it felt strangely cold. "Mom, look at this," Max said, running to show Clara. "That's beautiful, honey," she said absently, busy unpacking the kitchen. But when Max hung the bell on the tree, the room seemed to grow colder. Clara stopped unpacking and glanced toward the tree, shivering. "Did someone leave a window open?" she asked. The family dismissed it as a draft, but as the night wore on, the temperature in the cabin seemed to drop further, even though the fire blazed. The shadow in the snow. Later that evening, as the family sat down to play a board game, Max glanced out the window and frowned. "Someone's outside," he said. John got up and peered through the frosty glass. The forest outside was dark, lit only by the glow of the cabin lights reflecting off the snow. At first, he saw nothing, but then, in the distance, he saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the woods. It was tall and thin, cloaked in shadow, and it didn't move. "It's probably a tree," John said, though he sounded unsure. Emma joined him at the window, her brow furrowing. "That's not a tree, Dad." When they looked again, the figure was gone. The whispering bell. That night, Max woke up to a strange sound. It was faint, like the jingling of a bell, but it came from inside his room. He sat up, his breath visible in the freezing air. The bell on the Christmas tree, he was sure that's where the sound was coming from. Curious, Max tiptoed downstairs, the floorboards creaking under his small feet. The tree stood in the corner of the living room, its bare branches casting eerie shadows on the walls. The bell ornament swayed gently, though there was no breeze. "Hello," Max whispered. The jingling stopped, replaced by the faint sound of whispering. It was soft and fragmented, like several voices speaking at once, but he couldn't make out the words. Max backed away, his heart pounding, and ran back upstairs. A warning in the woods. The next morning, John decided to clear the snow around the cabin while the rest of the family prepared for Christmas Eve dinner. As he shoveled, he noticed footprints in the snow leading toward the woods. They were large, far too big for any of the family members, and they didn't belong to an animal. John followed them to the edge of the forest, where they stopped abruptly, as though the figure had vanished into thin air. A chill ran down his spine, and he quickly returned to the cabin. The fire goes out. That evening, as the family sat down for dinner, the fire in the hearth flickered and died suddenly, plunging the room into cold darkness. "John, what happened?" Clara asked, her voice tight with fear. "I don't know," John said, grabbing a flashlight. He checked the chimney and the logs, but there was no reason the fire should have gone out so quickly. The room grew colder by the second, and the faint sound of bells echoed from somewhere outside. "Is someone out there?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. John grabbed a coat and stepped outside, but the snow-covered yard was empty. The forest loomed in the distance, dark and silent. When he turned to go back inside, he noticed something on the cabin's door, a single handprint, too large and misshapen to be human. The history of the cabin. Unable to sleep, Clara searched the cabin for clues about its history. She found an old ledger in the desk drawer filled with handwritten notes about the cabin's previous owners. One entry caught her eye, December 24th, 1957. The bell must not ring. Keep it hidden. If it wakes, we are lost. Clara's heart raced as she reread the words. What bell? The glass ornament. The girl in the window. Emma woke that night to the sound of faint tapping. At first, she thought it was snow hitting the window, but when she turned over, she saw a pale face staring at her from outside. The face belonged to a girl, no older than Emma, with hollow eyes and skin so pale it was almost translucent. Emma screamed, and the face disappeared. The bell rings. The next morning, the family gathered around the tree to open presents. Max picked up the bell ornament, shaking it gently. "Don't touch that!" Clara snapped, snatching it away. But it was too late. The bell let out a soft, melodic chime, and the cabin seemed to shudder. The snowstorm that evening, a sudden snowstorm engulfed the cabin, cutting the family off from the outside world. The wind howled, and the windows rattled as snow piled up against the doors. "We're not going anywhere," John said grimly. As the storm raged, the whispering voices grew louder, echoing through the cabin. The spirit's warning. Clara began seeing the girl Emma had described, appearing in mirrors and reflections. The girl never spoke, but pointed toward the bell. "She's trying to warn us," Clara said, to be continued in the next message. "A cold winter's haunt," continued. The forest beckons. Max started acting strangely. He spent hours staring out the window, his breath fogging the glass. "They're calling me," he said when Clara asked what he was doing. "Who's calling you?" she demanded, but Max just shook his head and pointed toward the woods. That night, Max tried to leave the cabin. John caught him at the door, barefoot in the snow, reaching toward the forest. "I have to go," Max said in a monotone voice. John carried him back inside, but Max's eyes never left the trees. The cabin's curse. Clara read more of the ledger, piecing together the story of the cabin. It had been built by a family in the 1800s who had lived there for only one winter before vanishing without a trace. Subsequent owners reported strange phenomena, whispers, sightings of shadowy figures, and an unrelenting cold that no fire could chase away. The ledger hinted at a ritual involving the bell, but the details were incomplete. "We need to destroy it," Clara said. The shadows arrive. As the family prepared to burn the bell, the cabin grew unnaturally dark. Shadows crept across the walls, their forms twisting into grotesque shapes. The fire sputtered, and the shadows closed in, forcing the family into a tight circle in the living room. "They don't want us to destroy it," Emma whispered. Packed with the past. The girl appeared again, this time standing in the corner of the living room. She pointed to the bell, then to the forest. "She wants us to bring it back," Clara said. "The bell belongs out there." John hesitated, but agreed. They had no other choice. Into the woods. With the storm still raging, the family ventured into the forest, the bell wrapped in a blanket. The trees loomed tall and menacing, their branches clawing at the sky. The deeper they went, the louder the whispers grew, and the snow seemed to swirl unnaturally around them. Finally, they reached a clearing. At its center stood an ancient stone altar covered in frost. The ritual. Clara placed the bell on the altar as instructed in the ledger. The whispers rose to a deafening roar, and the shadows gathered at the edges of the clearing, watching. John lit a match and set the ledger's ritual page on fire. As the flames consumed the paper, the bell began to glow. The past unleashed. The ground trembled as the bell emitted a piercing chime. Images flashed before the family's eyes, visions of the cabin's original owners performing the ritual, their faces twisted in terror as they tried to banish the evil they had summoned. The shadows surged forward, but the girl's spirit appeared, blocking their path. The final battle. The family joined hands, repeating the incantation Clara had found in the ledger. The shadows screamed and lashed out, but the girl's light grew stronger, pushing them back. With one final chime, the bell shattered and the shadows dissolved into the night. Silence falls. The storm stopped suddenly, and the forest grew still. The girl gave the family a faint smile before fading away, her spirit finally at peace. Exhausted, the family returned to the cabin, which now felt warm and inviting for the first time. A Christmas to remember. On Christmas morning, the Landers family awoke to clear skies and a sense of calm. Though they knew they would never forget the horrors of the previous night, they were grateful to have survived, and for the lesson the girl had taught them. As they packed up to leave, Emma found a single shard of the bell on her nightstand, glinting in the sunlight. She slipped it into her pocket, unsure of what the future might hold. Whispers in the snow. As the family drove away, a faint chime echoed through the forest. The bell's spirit, it seemed, was not entirely gone.